Thank you, Annette. Sorry. Welcome to the Defense of Democracy discussion about the attack on higher education and what we are going to be doing about it or what can be done about it. My guest today is Leandra Preston. Leandra has a doctorate in gender and women's studies. She's from Florida State University, I believe. Leandra, I don't have your bio in front of me. I
Oh,
apologize.
it's
I should have
okay.
had that ready. But I'm gonna. But Leandra has generously offered to run this discussion, which I think is so very needed right now as a mom. Um, as a mom of kids who are entering this higher education and who are um, in higher education. So this is really a frightening time. So Leandra, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of introduce yourself and you can get started with the presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. Can everybody see the screen with the presentation page?
Yes,
Okay.
we can see you.
Okay, I am Leandra Preston. I have been at the University of Central Florida for over 2 decades. I was an English professor, but in 2004, I started teaching women's and gender studies, and that, became the rest of my career pretty much. I was already an activist and doing things, but I hadn't quite integrated, my teaching and activism in the way that I had hoped to and imagined. And women's and gender studies enabled me to do that. I spent a lot of my career at UCF, just fighting to exist as a program, as a faculty position. I was the first full-time women's studies. At the time, it was women's studies. I was the first full-time women's studies position that UCF had ever, funded, basically. We were like a funding special. So we were still marginalized, but at least we got a position. Now, it's never been a tenured track position. So, after 20 years of teaching, I'm still on a non-tenured track with a PhD, but that's not, it was like we had to try to get the program into a position to where then we could have a tenured line. And, I've spent the majority of my career simultaneously teaching full time, but also creating courses and building up enough curriculum so that given the opportunity, we could have a whole department and a major because we have a minor at UCF. So we were always fighting the political battle to, you know, for our legitimacy to, prove what we were doing was valuable and academic. And in fact, right now, this very moment, they just started doing a return on investment analysis in Florida to look at the gender studies programs to see what is the return on investment, which, for the little that they invest in us, I think that the return is going to be quite impressive considering they don't invest much in us. But it's always been a simultaneous battle to, teach and do the work of the program and for the students, but also try to maintain the existence of the program. And it's been, that kind of a challenge, but we've waxed and waned in terms of where we were able to progress some, and then, somebody else new, maybe a new dean or somebody would come in, and then we'd have to, make some adjustments and things like that. But so that's been the majority of my career. I want to get right into it. So, but I also will say a couple other things about myself. I do also have a school age daughter. I have an 11-year-old, and we're in Brevard County, which is, ground zero of ground zero when it comes to education, battles and Moms for Liberty and all of that. So I have seen it from two perspectives. It's been, an experience. So as a parent and then as a professor, working in this field that's already um, controversial as far as, a lot of people are concerned, and quote unquote, political, and we're always trying to show how we're an academic program more than, we're not just an activist program. We're not just about, this and that. We're always having to, um, just make these adjustments and find ways to help ourselves, just maintain funding and be able to do the work that we were doing that we know was very important and valuable. We have a tremendous number of um, minors in our program. So it has been a little more difficult for them to justify, cutting us if they ever were planning to. So we have been able to stay afloat prior to, this current wave of, I mean, Florida, I don't know how many people in here, if anybody in here is from Florida, but Florida's been fighting this battle for several years already. And this has been, it's been a long game already. So this is kind of like, feels like, level, like the final level of the whole, really long game. But um, I want to start this presentation by sharing. I did this, I talked about this last Tuesday, and I'm not sure how much overlap in terms of attendance there is. So I am going to be presenting a different but related, kind of presentation. So I have some overlap on the slides, which I'm going to share so that you all are welcome to have these slides. And I've embedded hyperlinks into them and whatnot so that you can, look at some of these things for yourself that we won't have time to get into to the extent I would like to. But I start with a quote from a professor of law at Florida A&M who talks about what we are witnessing in Florida is an intellectual reign of terror. There's a tremendous sense of dread, not just among faculty, it's tangible among students and staff as well. People are intellectually and physically scared. We are being named an enemy of the state. And then that's from his book. So, I mean, this quote really encapsulates, what we've been experiencing in higher education, whereas we have been in a position, unlike K through 12, who's been dealing with, you know, they've been dealing with this kind of censorship that higher education has largely been, I don't want to say immune from, but protected from, particularly by unions. Our union, which is another battle that I'll talk about a little bit, trying to sustain our union membership so that we are not decertified. So that's been our primary lifeline, has been our unions, fighting for our academic freedom as professors to do the research and do the teaching and do the work that, makes what we do unique and, in terms of expertise and discovering and pushing research boundaries and doing all of these things. We've been protected to do that without fear of being silenced by the government. And now we are being silenced by the government in higher education. And I wanted to really start with this little document, I guess. I actually, when this happened in 2022, this was when, in my experience, things really started getting real in higher education in Florida, because it had gradually, the structure of the state university system had gradually been moving away from democratic toward a bit more,
Sound grow.
I don't want to say autocratic, but in terms of more tied to, more political, more tied to the government, more appointees, not so democratic like it was, I believe, intended. And I could do a presentation on the evolution of the state university system, and you'll see how over time things have changed to where power is becoming more centralized, and it's becoming, to where it's basically all in the governor's hands, and the governor appoints people who ultimately have all of the decision-making power now in higher education, the state university system, where they did not before. It was, dispersed among faculty senate, the president, the, deans. It was more decentralized, and therefore, we had structures and checks and balances. If there was someone hired, there was a search committee. There were, very specific stipulations to maintain, you know, um, neutrality, and to maintain the quality of what we were doing. And gradually, more and more, of these power structures started shifting to where faculty had less and less power, but even the deans had less power. And really, ultimately, it even has come out of the president's hands to now where the governor and the president of the universities have the majority of the power. And this particular document, the higher education reform that DeSantis put out in 2022, this was related to Senate Bill 7044, to reform the higher education system. And this is where he really centralizes the power. He gives university boards of trustees and presidents the power to call a post-tenure review at any time. Now, some of these have been modified and changed through lawsuits and whatnot, but this was the first document that I experienced that I was like, oh, this is getting real. We really have to prepare for what's going to happen. And I actually created assignments around this document for my students to examine, to understand what was happening legislatively, in terms of what they were studying in my, intro to women's and gender studies classes. So, and I've been continuing to do that because I want to engage students in this specifically, where they go to the bill, they read the bill, because honestly, we all know some of this is it really is unbelievable the way that they'll lump different things into the bills. And really, until many of our students are required to go do this, they're not going to go read bills. Most people don't want to read bills. But when you do, it's incredible to see how much power they have, how much they can change. And we have seen it as somebody who's been in my university for over 20 years. It's absolute radical transformation, and not in a good way. So this particular document, which you can look closely, I linked the Senate bill that, you can go look at that specifically, because there's also things that I put on another slide to talk about, which was the integration of an implementation of these quote unquote world-class civics institutes at universities, which were funneling millions of dollars into quote unquote, civics programs. And the whole time that, the premise of this reform was, as we know, indoctrination, the indoctrination by the radical left professors, that this is what, we are sites of indoctrination. And now essentially what looks like is we're being indoctrinated, through these legislation, through these centers being set up, the way that they're restructuring the university to, at one point, one of the bills required that you only use texts from the canon, the literary canon, in general education. The majority of my career, when diversity was, a good thing, most of my career was spent with diversity. I don't like to say like this, but I mean, really being shoved down our throats, which for us was great because I'm in women's and gender studies. But to see such a radical transformation from the university pushing diversity, like really pushing it, to this, it's just so transparent, how political this is. It's so transparent, what's behind this. And it's so transparent that, I was actually blown away when I was looking at some of the integration of the world-class civics institutes and the millions of dollars that they were spending to set this up and fund it through, at University of Florida. And all of this was integrated into this bill, all of this on this higher education reform. So it's incredible to see how much, DeSantis tried to accomplish with this, and honestly, how much he did accomplish. Some of it has been undone, not a lot of it. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Hamilton Center and where some of this is coming from. And forgive me if, some of you are already well aware of this information, but I am not going to spend too much time on the legislation timeline because I talked about this on Tuesday, and it's also all here. And this is not comprehensive, but these were some of the highlights of, what's been happening, chipping away at academic freedom and freedom to learn, and, a democratic education and higher education. This is the legislation that's been chipping away. And a lot of this is also tied to K through 12, but some of this is specific to higher education. And, as people who do this work, I'm sure many of us are more familiar with the K through 12 bills, such as the Parental Rights in Education, but the Intellectual Freedom and Viewpoint Diversity Act, I believe that was specific to the public college system. So I also have another link to where you can actually see this Intellectual Freedom and Viewpoint Diversity Act was one of the early attempts to, wrest control and of the way that the university was functioning, and then start shifting the accusation of indoctrination to literal conservative indoctrination of, in these programs and in this legislation that's being implemented. So this is the other big one that we faced was the Senate Bill 266, which was the anti-DEI legislation, which prohibited, public universities from using state or federal funding to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or to support certain majors and minors deemed to be based on unproven theoretical or exploratory content, which is so unbelievable for a university. I mean, this is what we're supposed to be investing in, is the exploratory content, pushing the boundaries. This is the absolute place that we've always been encouraged and allowed to do this. And so and then it also grants university boards of trustees more authority over faculty hiring and curriculum decisions. This was when we really saw the shift in higher education from faculty making decisions and being part of the conversation to not even just administrators, but politicians. It was first, administrators, we were pushed out in a sense that faculty's voices weren't valued in the same way that they had been in terms of hiring. And then it somehow, through this legislation and changing the way that our system operated and the power structure, now the politicians are making the decisions. Now they've gone an extra step to where now we're seeing politicians appointed to president of university positions. In fact, to where just about, the main universities in Florida have now have presidents appointed by the governor who are also politicians, not faculty, not researchers, not in education, but politicians. And I have some examples, but I would need a whole, really needed another presentation to talk about. I feel like every aspect of this, because it's been so dramatic. It's been, what Trump is doing right now with the just overwhelm. I can't remember what they've been calling it, but, like the flood, the whatever they're saying, that's what it's been, as we know in education in Florida, but that's then like the next wave was what's been happening in higher education, where it's difficult to even keep up with what's happening. So, if you notice the dates on these, like 21, 22, 23, 23, 24, and then we start seeing a whole 23 and 24 is really stepping it up, how much legislation we're seeing. Let me change. There we go. 24, 24, 24. This was fairly recent, obviously, October of 2024, which is when they did the shift to allow the appointees to make the curriculum decisions, because why would faculty be making these decisions? Right? So now the politicians are making the decisions, and Florida's public universities announced the removal of hundreds of general education courses to comply with state law aimed at eliminating woke ideologies in higher education. And this was when we saw sociology as a general education option removed from the list of courses. Not only was sociology removed from the list of courses as a general education option, but there are 3 different classes that deal with Bible that are included in the general education. So we have 3 courses based on biblical texts in general education, but not sociology, because what they were trying to do originally was to make it to where we could not discuss gender, race, or class. Well, not class so much specifically, but gender or race or sexuality in the general education requirements, because, if we're talking about that as woke, so how we can, accomplish what we want to as a medical school and not talk about gender and sex and sexuality, it's silly. We know that. It's silly. But that has been the goal for the last few years. Ultimately here they finally just start saying it. We're trying to eliminate woke ideologies in higher education. So I just have some screenshots. Most of these should have links to the actual articles, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Hamilton Center and this idea of civics education. And I think many of us are tuned in enough to know how to read, the dog whistle words, the words that we know, the patriot and the freedom and the choice and the way that they're used to manipulate um, and make things sound like, they're doing good things so that people will support them and people will think that, the boogeyman of the, radical left professor is not going to be, damaging your children anymore. Now, we're going to be teaching about things like civics and um I was trying to think of the other word, but in the summer of 2022, we started seeing reports about this, as they call the strange appearance of $3 million in one-time funds from Florida's GOP-controlled state legislature for the Hamilton Center for Classical and Civics Education in the University of Florida. So the University of Florida said they did not request this. They did not have anything to do with this decision making. This was something that came from outside the university, from the politicians that are now, it's becoming a little bit blurry now, where we are administration and the politicians who are creating this legislation. It's obviously there's a conflict of interest going on here. But this is another link. This talks a lot more about the Hamilton Center, because when I was looking at the Hamilton Center trying to figure out, like who's at the root, who's at the bottom of this, where does this come from? There's not an about us, but all of the words are there that, classical and civics education, and they're, dumping millions of dollars into this program while they're cutting an outrageous amount of programs, because how the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion are so broad when we're talking about academic areas of study, and higher education, that, I mean, really, you can relate. I mean, biology, has issues because they can't talk about climate change, or you can't do certain things like this. So it's, things that have maybe previously seemed more neutral. I mean, I know that I'm in the hot button women's and gender studies. We expect this, right? We expect to be attacked. We expect to be targeted in Florida, but biology and sociology and courses like that being targeted it's just unbelievable. So this is more current legislation, but you see, I mean, it's stepping up, right? I mean, we know this has been happening across the board in education, but a lot of these are actually all targeting higher education. So
Dr. Preston, I want to bring to your attention something in the chat that I was just thinking myself. Someone has shared kudos to Dr. Preston for maintaining such calm and poise in presenting this devastating information so effectively. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm sitting here absolutely stunned. Being from New York, and being someone who really loved my gender and women's studies classes and my women and my minorities in literature, like, just heartbroken to see this. So sorry, I just had to say that because
I
you're just
appreciate
really,
that very much,
you're
because I'm
amazing.
looking at the chat. So, and I really do appreciate it. And there have definitely been tears. But it's been in, like, just that, survival mode is really the only way I can describe it. Is it's almost like a disassociation, because now the only way to continue going as hard as we have to go, it really is to get into survival mode. I definitely had, like, the feeling of everything I've done in my career basically just being ripped out from under me is how it's felt. It's it's devastating, and it has been devastating. But I am so grateful for organizations like this, and then our union and the leadership of our union that, I mean, relentlessly fight on our behalf. That is really what does keep me going, and this group has really given me like a little bit of a renewed boost that I needed. So I appreciate. I will definitely look at the chat. I want to try to make sure I get through. There's like so much. It's so much. We've been inundated with attacks. I mean, just inundated. As you can see, I mean, this is not even comprehensive because I knew I only had, a limited amount of time to talk about this. But I did include some links. I talked about this at length a little bit more on last Tuesday. And we were lucky to have one of my colleagues who was the director of the Women's and Gender Studies program at New College when there was a Women's and Gender Studies program at New College. And she shared her experience, and she was kind enough to share her slides, some of her slides that she's done on the presentation, because New College was the first college who was explicitly attacked by DeSantis, where he basically fired everyone, almost everyone on their board, everyone, I believe, at New College. I could be wrong, but it was close enough, including the president, and then appointed all of, the appointees that were all politically motivated. And then appointed Richard Corcoran, who was a politician, a Republican politician, to be the president of New College. And if, a lot of people aren't familiar with New College, but New College was extremely successful liberal arts college. They did things, it was a really kind of a experimental in a way, I mean, as a start, and it just evolved into a really special program, a special college. It was a public college, but it functioned, like some private colleges, and it was just a really incredible and neat kind of program that they were, it was successful. I can't remember what their rankings were, but they were ranked pretty high. And just in this one single year since DeSantis basically devastated New College, I mean, the statistics and the numbers are absolutely expected, but still so stunning to see how like far it dropped in terms of rankings. I'm going to have to look that up and share that with you. But so basically, the first meeting with the new trustees, the board votes to fire New College president. Board announces plans to name Richard Corcoran. And then to add insult to injury, they approved a base salary of like $700,000 for him, which was more than double the previous president. So it's just, it's like they're not even trying. They're not even trying to appear, that any appearance of propriety. It's just like everything's off. It's just like, this is what we're doing. So then things went from bad to worse for New College, and it was a literal takeover. So I shared some links, and Professor Amy Reed, she was the director. She's actually not even in Florida anymore. She said they drove her out of Florida. She's working with Penn America now, though, doing incredible work. So I didn't mention this, but when post COVID, when that first form that I showed you, the reform came out, the director of our women's and gender studies program, Dr. Ann Bubrisky, she said, why don't we get together with the other directors across the state and see what their universities are doing, and what does this look like where they are, and how is everybody handling it? And then we can, maybe find some solidarity and help ourselves by working together. And so we formed a group on Signal that was pretty much the chairs and professors from the Women's and Gender Studies program. Most of our programs are very small. UCF, we only have 2 of us make up the entire Women's and Gender Studies. Of course, we have people in other programs that teach courses, but as far as just doing Women's and Gender Studies, there's only 2 of us. So we formed this, kind of group, and then we had Anna Escamani, who is a incredible advocate in Florida. For anybody who doesn't know who she is, she was a Women's and Gender Studies student of ours at UCF for several years, and
Yeah,
She's
she
just,
was on our podcast. She actually signed our pledge. We've done a lot of work with
yeah,
Onyx.
I've
She's
seen her in your, yeah, she's incredible. So she's in that group with us. She's an advocate. In fact, so this is what happened with New College, right? Well, now today, right now it's been since last week or 2 weeks ago, University of West Florida has been under attack. Now this is DeSantis is turning his sights. He's fired the whole, he's fired and appointed the um, the board of trustees. He's fired the president and now appointed a politician. And I don't know about the salary. I will definitely look into that, see if they doubled her salary from the previous. And here we go. This is what's going on. And I found out literally today in our Signal group, Anna Escamani told us they just had their first meeting since the changes were made, and they have eliminated the Women's and Gender Studies program at the University of West Florida. I don't know that that's been officially made public but it's not like I'm telling you something I'm not allowed to tell you, but she said, I'll follow up with more information. But that was just today. So, another university is dealing with this. And FIU has also been dealing with, we've all been dealing with, the legislation, but New College was, and I used this term before, the canary in the coal mine, not just for Florida universities, but for the nation, as particularly with red states. And we've already seen this, and some of you may be in states that are undergoing these similar attacks to your higher education system. But DeSantis is quite proud because he has definitely done to Florida what they plan to do to the rest of the country if they are allowed to destroy education across the country. So this was another slide I'm just going to share with you, but this was something that happened at New College. They basically found all of the books from their gender studies program, from the LGBTQ, the Pride Center. All of these books were literally in the dumpster at New College, like in the dumpster. And these were, it was just such a symbolic, mess. It's like, look, we're abolishing the gender studies program. Now we're throwing out the trash. That's what a trustee of New College of Florida said, a trustee. And these are the people who make decisions. So so that was New College, and now UWF is now, and then I believe FIU has been targeted as well. So I imagine they will be next. I wanted to share this. AAUP is they formed a special committee and did a report on what was happening with the political interference in Florida's higher education system. And the findings, I just kind of summed up the findings. They found that there was unprecedented political interference. They talked about the takeover of New College. It was highlighted as a test case for conservative overhauls in higher education. And the political interference was described as unparalleled in US history. The legislative actions such as Senate Bill 266, the anti-DEI bill, were, this is something else. Of course, the legislative actions target the DEI programs and impose post-tenure reviews, which also threatens academic freedom and faculty governance. And now I don't think we talk about this enough, but the way that we self-censor as a result of some of this legislation, particularly, I know people like me, I'm non-tenure, I'm a solo parent, I need my job. We are scared, we don't want to lose our jobs. But for me personally, what I teach, I can't teach what I teach without teaching about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, intersectionality. That's what we do. Everything we do is through an intersectional lens. And I'm honestly not going to refuse to teach critical race theory, because critical race theory is really a basis of so much of the work that I do and so much of the research that I do, that it would be doing such a disservice to the field, such a disservice to the students, that it really is like, you know, I mean, they're the only way, I mean, they're just that I can not teach those things is if I'm not teaching. Um, because it's so essential to what we do, and it's so essential. And to tell, you know, people at a university you can't teach about race is absolutely, it's just absurd. So, and gender, I mean, and a lot of the ways that they talk about gender and sex demonstrates a lack of understanding about the distinctions between sex and gender, which demonstrates that they really need us more than ever. Um, you know, I know that some of these appointees would benefit from taking one of our classes in women's and gender studies. But this was something else I wanted to highlight as, you know, we're a national organization. This is a national group that the AAUP warns that Florida's actions could serve as a blueprint for similar interventions in public higher education across the country. And, you know, these are real threats. This is something else that I wanted to, this is like one of the bases of all of this legislation is built on is this idea, right? This notion of freedom from indoctrination, that like that's what we're doing. And it really presents such a narrow vision of higher education that it's actually it's tragic because you know there's so many programs, there's so much research, there's so much, you know, from cancer funding to social work to foreign languages and global relations. I mean, you know, it's a university and they're presenting such a narrow view. I get it. Maybe you want to come to women's and gender studies and accuse us of some of these things, but to do it as a just a swath is so it's just so it's just madness. I don't even know. I mean, I literally am and sometimes at a loss for words. So but I thought this would be valuable for us in this group because this is also, you know, kind of a warning about how these things may unfold across the country. Is, you know, is this idea of this freedom from indoctrination, which is based on a false premise. It's based on a premise as if this is what we're doing, as if it's a factual thing that we're doing when it's not. So the Goldwater Institute is supporting or funding a lot of these, or they're using this premise to justify so much of what's happening, and they literally lay it down, and they even say this model legislation may be adopted, right? Like as standalone language or paired with any of the following related model legislation. So this is like their blueprint, right? So I linked to this, I linked somewhere, and you will be able to go straight to this Freedom from this Goldwater Institute, because underneath I just did a little screenshot, but this is a full document that basically provides an overview. You know, here's how to you know, here's how to do a fascist takeover of the content of your university. So, and then this is to K through 12. So, but this is obviously more current, the executive order about ending radical indoctrination in K through 12 schooling. So, and then this was prior to Trump being reelected, but these are all really just I think they're important to look at and to see kind of the way that they're doing this as a blueprint. You know, it's like Florida education includes, will not include. This is what, you know, the first of its kind in the nation, right? Like, look at, we're the leader in this. We're going to show you how to do this. And then the consequences, tools for employees and teachers to fight back. So this site, you know, provides tools to fight back because I took this, you know, from not the governor. So I include links to that as well, but let me try to make sure I get through everything. I want to make sure I leave I'm going to zoom through because I really want to have time for people to ask questions. So this, I talked a little bit about this, but this is a link to this article and the Chronicle of Higher Education. If you have any interest in higher education, it's absolutely incredible. You get, I think 4 to 5 free articles every day. You don't have to pay. But even for people in K through 12, I think they include a lot of really fantastic writing and research and information. So it's really a great source. And so they talked about how Florida scrubbed identity politics from the general education curricula. And this is new. This is brand new that this happened, within the last, well, January 29th was this article, but the end of last year, the very end of the year is when they did the general education overhaul. And this was another excellent kind of, it provides a description, a tracker, and articles and videos of this, Donald Trump and higher education. So this is really another comprehensive resource. And then, of course, I wanted to spend some time talking about, resistance and what's been done, because this isn't all, it's not like we're laying down and letting this happen. For every legislation, there's multiple lawsuits that are filed, whether by the union in conjunction with the ACLU. Right now, there's an ACLU's federal lawsuit that many professors from different state universities are a part of, including the former president of our faculty union, Robert Casanello. He is a history professor. And so then we've got the United Faculty of Florida also filed a different lawsuit. And then the Stop Woke Act, which was one of the early legislation, was permanently shut down by Judge Mark Walker, who actually quoted 1984 in his order. It was actually like a beautiful response. It was so vindicating. So these were just some of the things that, we have been doing to push back, and, but honestly, it feels like they're winning right now as far as women's and gender studies goes. So this is incredible. If you were in the meeting on Tuesday, we were introduced to a really awesome legislation tracker, and the tracker, around Project 2025. And this is a DEI legislation tracker. So it's really, it's basically, I track state legislation to restrict colleges' efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's not just, Florida, it's all over the country. So this may be interesting for some of you. And then these are some of, I could have, do 50 pages like this, because there's so much action and so much, this is all resistance. So, it's like university union sues state over membership threshold, because the union busting has been absolutely incredible. Our union, we had probably 30% of dues paying members in our union, and they raised the threshold to 60%. We have to have 60% of dues paying members or we get decertified. And not only that, but they also no longer allow us to pay our dues out of our paychecks. So we have to now get everybody who's a dues paying member to now, set up a whole different system to pay. And it's just been a total nightmare. And thankfully we have been doing it successfully. UCF has, and I know a lot of the other unions have been as well, but it's required 10 times as much work as we should be doing to do, just to exist. So this is the one this is like from today, these two, no, this one's old, sorry. This on the top right corner, this UWF students protest against Board of Trustees appointment. This is like within the last few days to a week. So, and this is a video that talks a little bit more about what they're doing now to University of West Florida, which in my opinion is we're going to be like dominoes. I started kind of like, okay, I'm running out of time here. So, but I still hadn't talked about the National Institute of Health funding cuts. And that's incredible. And that means everything to universities, to so many universities doing so much research, cancer research. So much different research that is so important and essential and valuable to so many people, regardless of political party. So that's a whole other presentation that maybe somebody will do, and talk about NIH funding and, what are the implications of all of this, really. So I wanted to make sure to, leave a little bit of time to talk about it and answer questions and hear about, if anybody's going through these similar things.
So thank you. I didn't need to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I'm done. My next slide is thank you, but I want to leave this slide up because,
Okay, great. I am I don't know if you can see me. Hold on one second. Add spotlight. Okay. So actually, I am going to talk a little bit about what defense of democracy is doing specifically in resistance to this, because everything that Dr. Preston is talking about has to do with public perception and public outcry. And what's happening right now is everything in the news we're seeing, like she's saying, dominoes falling, right? It feels overwhelming. I see in the chat, it feels like we're losing with everything. Okay, so what has to be done, and I mean, I can't really think of anything else. What has to be done is a very visible and very public statement made by people like you and me and everyone who is just, you know, I mean, it's grassroots is what it is. Dr. Preston, I want to show a video if you don't mind. Can you, I don't know how to make
Oh,
you.
what do I have to do to unshare? Let me see if I can.
I did it.
Okay, good.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple things that I want to show. So I want to show, this is an example of, this just a quick video of our volunteer state director in Florida. This is just, this woman is actually a former hairdresser, and she is a volunteer and she helps us out. And these are the people I am looking to recruit someone like this in every state. I have 20 states that have volunteer state directors, which means that those states are ready to start recruiting and mobilizing chapters, which in turn recruit and mobilize within their school districts. And I mean, I'm talking about school districts, you know, at all levels, right? This is absolutely not just limited to K through 12. So I want to, I like this video because it really shows you the defense of democracy, I guess, attitude about how we approach this. We are not shrinking violets, right? We are not going to play both sides of the fence and toe the line. Like, this is not the time for that. The time for that is done. So this is Amy.
My name is Amy Raub. I'm in Brevard County, Florida, and I'm now the volunteer state director for defense of democracy. I had been paying attention to politics before, but not in depth, you know. Then I saw that our local school board member, that we actually voted for was Tina Deskovich.
We are taking back education in this country.
I started reading in the paper about how she's trying to creep religion into our schools. And it was like, I was like, wait a minute.
Our goal long-term to have a Moms for Liberty member in their Moms for Liberty shirt at every school board meeting from now to the end of time.
I have kids in school and I don't want their freedoms taken. And I just went like full-fledged, nah, I'm not gonna shut up anymore.
There was a Moms for Liberty woman talking about how I wouldn't want my 17-year-old boy to read this book. What are you talking about? Like, literally, what are you talking about? 17-year-old boys need to know about rape. They're the ones that do it.
Shame the book banners. Is that too much to say? Let's get loud. Let's call them out. You know, one's a real estate agent. I'm sure that her people might want to know that, you know, she's a racist, you know, homophobe.
Liberty for me and not for thee. That's you guys, okay? Book banners never go down well in history, ever. Okay, just remember that.
They should not feel so comfortable driving up to Brevard County with a little group of people and banning 11 books from my kids.
Why are you so scared of books? Why are you so scared of books and not guns? Because you just don't pay attention to the data. You're so.
And we know that the more options these kids have, the more they read, period. The end. We need the Department of Education. I have a nephew who is on the spectrum, and I go to his IEP meetings at his elementary school, which is a table of experts just dissecting where his problems are and how to fix them. This is magical. Every kid deserves that if they're struggling. And they want to take that away. They want to take the funding for that away. They are not for every child. Not. Now is definitely not the time to roll over. We have got to fight for those who can't, period.
Okay, so I mean, really, I like that. And there's I mean, there's like a whole bunch more videos like that with other people. Like I keep showing Amy. Well, I want to show her because a lot of people here from, we were talking about Florida. We've got Debbie from New York, who's a senior, who is like just kicking ass. And we've got Marley from Texas, who is a high school senior and a girl of color, and probably one of the most fantastic, mobilizing, like incredible young women I've ever met in my life. So we will take anyone who has the time to give and the passion to give. You don't have to be polished. You don't have to be a public speaker. You just need to be able to speak up for education, because that's what we're talking about, what we're seeing in Florida as a freaking cautionary tale for the rest of the country. So they cannot do this if they know the community is rallied around education and gender studies and all of this diversity, which we have been for so long, and it's so unfair to see it taken away. So that was my plug for Defense of Democracy. If you're not already involved, but we are the only national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, single focused on protecting schools from extremists. We started in response to Moms for, I'm like so fired up about your presentation. That made me so angry. We started in response to Moms for Liberty, and we thought at the time that it was going to be like, we figured it would be a long battle. We did not know we were going into this. So that was 3 years ago. Now we've got this whole other world, and we have lost support. No one is coming to save us. We must save ourselves. And so that's where we're doing. So then the other thing I wanted to show and to share was this legislative tracker, excuse me. The people who developed this tracker are actually, I'm doing a presentation with them in a couple weeks, so keep an eye on our workshops and presentations. But this is the legislative tracker that they just launched, and I just thought it was so cool. So we're gonna try it now. I'm gonna walk you through it, and obviously I'll share the link. But I don't know. Let's pick a state. Who's got a state you want me to look into? I'm trying to see the chat so that I don't miss you. Let's see. Whose state? Whoever puts their state up first, that's the one I'm going to look into right now. And did you guys say what? Maybe, Oklahoma, Virginia. Okay, so let's see. We'll do Oklahoma. Oklahoma. That's fun. Okay, Oklahoma. So I can click on Oklahoma, and I can click on, let's see, we'll click on all years. And then I want to look specifically at education. So I'm going to go to the subcategory for education. So I'm going to unclick all of these, and I'll leave libraries, etc. So they make it nice and easy to see all of these bills that are specific to education in your state. And this is why it's so important to make things easy for people. This is why I love this. This reminds me of Defense of Democracy, because we don't just sit here and say, you go to your school board meetings. You need to write a letter to the editor. We say, here is the text to share, to write a letter to your editor, and here's a script, and here is who the person is. So absolutely take all of the work out of it so that you can actually go out there and get there. So that's what I wanted to share. Leandra, I know someone asked if you would consider sharing your slideshow. Would you consider doing that?
I am definitely going to share it, and I'm going to double check before I send it to you that all the hyperlinks are where.
Okay, great.
So I will definitely do that.
And I'll be publishing, this will be published on our YouTube channel. And you have put your email address in there. So you're sharing your contact information, which is great. I just put the link to the democracy chat tracker in the chat. And does anyone have any specific questions or anything you'd like to ask? Or, I feel like you covered a lot, and
I did. I
and there is a simple answer, but there is no easy answer. The simple answer is you have to get involved and speak out, especially if you are not in a minority group, especially if you are, pick your privilege. You're white, you're a man, you live in a blue state, you have a job that's not under threat, right? Like, these are the things that we need to start, these are the people that we need to start speaking out. And for those of you who cannot, especially at defensive democracy, there are plenty of roles that are not front facing. We need researchers, we need people to help organize, we need people who do, graphic design. So we are a fully volunteer driven organization. So that's what we need. DC girl, if you are from Washington, DC, I actually am just recruited and hopefully will be onboarding soon a volunteer state director for DC, which means we'll be starting to mobilize there as well. So. And thank you. And the donation. So let me do a little teeny time. First of all, Dr. Preston has been so kind. She is reflecting my screen, and we both have the QR code to donate. Defense of Democracy, and I'm very open about this. We operate, and anybody can check. We operated last year. Our income was $60,000 for the organization. That was it. That funded this whole movement. So I can promise you that every dollar that you donate to this organization will go 100% to fighting for our schools. I am not here because I'm making money. I am here because Dr. Preston is doing what she's doing. I mean, you're a single mom, you've got to rely on your job, but how can you not do what you were called and put on this earth to do and turn your back on people? I certainly am in a place where I would not be able to raise my head, with so many people I love who are trans, who are people of color, who have children. That's what we're doing, and that's what we're recruiting. So I want to thank everyone for your time. Thank you for those who have donated. If you can donate, please consider, and definitely consider getting involved. Dr. Preston, do you want to say anything to close out?
I appreciate everyone being here, people just showing up here. I mean, this is huge. And then I've included my contact info on the slideshow as well. And I wanted to say about what you were saying about, using our privilege. I have so many people are like, why don't you leave Florida? Why don't you try to get a job somewhere else? You can do women's gender studies. No, because Florida needs me. There's so many people who don't have a choice if they can stay or go. And I'm not going anywhere, That's what I say about women's and gender studies too. They're going to have to drag me out by my feet if they want me to stop doing this at UCF, and maybe they will, but I mean, that's how I'm going out if I'm going out, because I'm not going to stop doing exactly what I'm here to do. So, and students deserve it.
All the kids deserve it,
So I appreciate everyone here. I appreciate you letting me talk about this so much. I really do. And thank you, Karen, for all you do.
All right. Well, thank you too. And everyone, you will be invited. I will be sending out an email. You'll be invited to take the next step, and I hope you do. Thank you all.
Thank you.